The average McDonald's in America sells about $4 million of food a year. The person who owns it, who signed a $2 million loan, who works 60 hours a week, who fires people and hires people and mops the lobby at midnight, takes home around $150,000. McDonald's Corporation takes about $570,000 from that exact same store for doing none of that. And here's the part almost nobody knows. Only about $160,000 of it is the franchise royalty. The rest is rent. Before you sell a single Big Mac, here's the bill. Total initial investment, $1,470,500 to $2,728,000. That's the current franchise disclosure document, the legal document McDonald's must give you before you sign. Inside that, a $45,000 franchise fee. Equipment, signs, seating, decor, opening inventory, training travel. But the real gate is this. McDonald's requires roughly $500,000 to $750,000 in liquid, non-borrowed funds. Not equity in your house, not a loan. Cash you already have and can lose. So the filter is brutal before you start. You need most of $1 million in cash, and then you take on debt for the rest. Now, what do you actually get for that? You get a 20-year agreement. You get a building McDonald's chose. And you get a menu, a supply chain, and a price list you don't control. You do not get the land. You do not get the building. Hold on to that. It's the whole video. Here's where it gets good. Because McDonald's publishes the real numbers. They're legally required to. In the FDD, there's a section called Item 19. It contains a pro forma built from 11,332 real franchisee restaurants. Actual financial statements from actual owners. At a store doing $3.2 million in annual sales, that pro forma shows operating income before occupancy costs of $812,000. $812,000. That's 25.4%. On a burger restaurant, that's a fantastic number. Better than almost any restaurant on earth. Food cost, paper, crew payroll, utilities, insurance, the 4% advertising fee, all of that is already paid. $812,000 is what's left. So why does the owner only take home $150,000? Look at that phrase again. Operating income before occupancy costs. Before occupancy. Before rent. And McDonald's specifically defines it as excluding rent, the service fee, depreciation, interest, and income taxes. Everything that kills you is on the other side of that line. Let's take the $812,000 apart. Royalty, the service fee, 4% of gross sales. On $3.2 million, that's $128,000. Gone. Rent, approximately 10.7% of gross sales. On $3.2 million, that's $342,000. Gone. Read those two numbers next to each other. The rent is nearly 3 times the royalty. Everyone thinks a franchise is about the brand license. That the 4% is the price of the golden arches. The 4% is almost a rounding error next to what McDonald's charges you to stand in the building. And I can prove this from the corporate side, not just the franchisee side. Go to McDonald's 2025 annual report. In the United States, franchisees generated $51.9 billion in sales. From that, McDonald's collected $7.37 billion in franchised revenue. Divide it, 14.2%. McDonald's takes 14 cents of every single dollar that crosses the counter at a U.S. franchised restaurant. 4 of those cents are royalty. The other 10 are rent. So back to our $812,000. Subtract $342,000 of rent and $128,000 of royalty, and you're at $342,000. Before depreciation, before interest on your $2 million loan, before taxes, Run those, and the majority of franchisees land at roughly $150,000 a year. On $3.2 million of sales, that's a net margin of under 6%. You built a $4 million business to make what a good dentist makes. This isn't an accident. It's the founding design, and it's almost 70 years old. In the 1950s, Ray Kroc was expanding fast and going broke, collecting a tiny slice of franchise revenue while carrying all the debt. A CFO named Harry Sonneborn looked at the books and restructured the entire company around one idea. McDonald's buys or leases the land, then leases it back to the franchisee at a markup. Sonneborn's own description of the business: "We are in the real estate business." He said the only reason they sold hamburgers was that hamburgers were the best way to generate the revenue tenants used to pay rent. In 1956, he created Franchise Realty Corporation. It saved the company. And look at what it built. As of the end of 2025, McDonald's owns approximately 56% of the land and approximately 80% of the buildings across its consolidated markets. Here's the mechanism, and it's beautiful and merciless. McDonald's finances the property at long-term fixed rates, but your rent is a percentage of your sales. So when inflation hits and you raise your prices, McDonald's rent goes up. When you run a brilliant promotion and sales jump 15%, McDonald's rent goes up. Their cost on that building doesn't move. Yours does. You are not a business partner. You are a tenant with a performance bonus that pays them. Now put the two businesses side by side. Same stores, same fries. The franchisee, $3.2 million in sales, roughly 6% net margin. McDonald's Corporation, 2025, operating margin of 46.1%. On the franchise side specifically, it's worse than that. McDonald's collected $16.5 billion in franchised revenue and paid $2.6 billion in occupancy costs against it. That's a franchised margin of $13.9 billion, about 84%. 84 cents of every rent and royalty dollar drops through. Meanwhile, the whole system did $139.4 billion in system-wide sales in 2025. McDonald's only booked $26.9 billion of that as its own revenue, and turned it into $8.56 billion of net income. They don't want the $139 billion. The $139 billion comes with employees and grease traps and lawsuits. They want the 14 cents. And here's the proof that they know exactly what they're doing. McDonald's still operates about 5% of its stores itself. Look at what those earn. In 2025, U.S. company-owned restaurants did $3.1 billion in sales and produced a restaurant margin of $360 million. That's 11.6%, and it fell 14% year over year. McDonald's is better at running McDonald's than anyone alive, and running the restaurant is still the worst business in the building. That's why they've spent 2 decades refranchising, selling the operations, keeping the deed. They didn't franchise because they couldn't manage 45,000 restaurants. They franchised because being the landlord is a 46% margin business, and being the operator is an 11% margin business. Because $150,000 per store isn't the point either. The average McDonald's franchisee owns around 8 restaurants. 8 times $150,000 is $1.2 million a year, and now the math looks very different. The corporate overhead spreads. You hire supervisors instead of working the line. And when you exit, you're not selling a job, you're selling cash flow at a multiple. McDonald's franchisees also have something rare: the safest tenant relationship in retail. In 2025, McDonald's opened 2,276 restaurants, closed 396, and grew system-wide sales 7%. Existing operators get first shot at new stores. The brand actually works. U.S. average unit volume climbed from $3.797 million in 2023 to about $4.06 million in 2025. So the deal is real. It's just not the deal people imagine. You are not buying a money printer. You are buying a low-margin, high-revenue operating business, at scale, from a landlord who takes the first 14 cents and never takes a risk. $4 million in. About $150,000 out for the person who owns it. About $570,000 out for the company whose name is on the sign. And roughly $410,000 of that is rent, not royalty. The 4% you think you're paying for the golden arches? That's the cheap part. The expensive part is the dirt underneath you. You will never own it. You'll pay more for it every year you succeed, and on the day your 20-year agreement ends, McDonald's still holds the deed.